Our next speaker, again a long-term friend and associate of our association, Giulia Cancian, is the Secretary General of the European Biogas Association. And we've been working with Giulia for many years, both in her role in the IrBEA and in formerly when she worked with Bioenergy Europe in advocacy and strategy. She coordinated the development and delivery of many policy reports and the organisational work structures within the group itself. Prior to that, she worked in the areas of energy, transport, biodiesel, non-ferrous metals and hydropower European trade associations throughout Brussels. She holds an MA in International Relations from the University of Rome and an MSc in European Affairs from the Free University of Brussels. So, Giulia, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thanks a lot, first of all, to IrBEA for the invitation today. It's really good to be here. So my presentation today is about biomethane. We heard this word many times today. So I'm hoping to provide you with an overview of what is happening in Europe in general, and this maybe can be also helpful to have some references of where to go for the future from Ireland. I have divided my presentation in 3 parts. I will go back to IrBEA just in a little bit. I would like to talk about the role of biomethane today in the European energy mix, but also how we are growing. And we will look at what we can hope for in 2030 and 2040. And later on, I will close with the European new institutional cycle and what we can expect for the next 5 years. So it's a bit of a crystal ball session. Before we go there, a couple of words about the association I belong to. So IrBEA is representing the full value chain of biogases, meaning biogas, biomethane, biohydrogen, and synthetic methane from biogenic CO2. At the moment, we represent 312 members, for which more than 250 are companies, 50 are national associations. We also have some research centers and university within our membership. The idea is that we span from producers of biogas and biomethane, distribution system operators and transmission system operators, so the network, but also large off-takers of biomethane. And here we go. Biogases today. So biomethane has been growing quite steadily in the last years, and the volume of production has doubled in the last 4 years. At the moment, we have, well, actually in 2022, we had 4.5 billion cubic meters installed capacity in Europe, for which most of it was placed in the EU 27. The main countries that are producing biomethane in Europe are France, Italy, Denmark, and the UK, and they are also the fastest growing countries, especially France and Italy, as I will show you later on. The good news is that if we were looking at our sector only 5 to 6 years ago, there were only a handful of countries that were actually producing biomethane. Today, we can happily say that in Europe we have 24 countries who started operations on biomethane, so we can hope for a faster and steeper growth into the future. Every year, the IrBEA looks at numbers in a very detailed manner, and this is also because the European Commission doesn't. So every year, we try to track down each and every operations for biomethane that is going to start. So in 2024, we had 1,548 plants into operations. And in this boring slide here, you see a little bit of details. This means that in 2024, we reached actually 6.4 billion cubic meters of biomethane installed capacity in Europe, meaning also counting countries such as the UK, Norway, and Switzerland. And Germany stays the main countries for installed capacity, but stalled in 2024. France grew quite rapidly and is the second one, and is followed by United Kingdom, Italy, and Denmark. Now, the growth has been quite impressive in terms of installed capacity. In the EU27, this has corresponded to 37%. And here you get the geographical distribution. So this is where the main and the bulk of our plants are. As you will notice, the country that has the most plant is France, but it's not the one where the most installed capacity is, and this is because plants in France are historically of small and medium size rather than large. Whereas if you look at Denmark or the Netherlands, plants tends to be on the larger side. The average biomethane plant in Europe is at the moment 468 normal meter cube an hour. Just a quick look at the historical distribution. Here you see basically the number of plants that are still operational per their start in operation year. And I wanted to underline 3 milestones here. So in 2016, we had the proposal of the RED II, and you see that still the market was quite dynamic, even though the first sustainability criteria for gaseous biomass fuels were introduced at the time. And in 2020, 2021, we had a big disruption of supply chains, and the lead times for building new operations were quite long. And yet the market proceeded quite strongly, although there were some delays in the entering into operation of certain plants. Now, where is this biomethane going? So this is the answer. Most of it is being injected into the grid. And most of it is being injected into the distribution grid and a part into the transport grid. Some is liquefied on site, and for some we do not have the answer yet. So we are, year by year, we're trying to improve the detail of our data, and we'll see whether in 2025 we will get rid of the unknown portion of this graph. A little note, I actually saw the very latest data this morning. I have been communicated by our technical department that for 2023, the growth will be a bit steeper than it has been in 2022. So what I can tell you already is that we have reached the 4.1 billion cubic meter of biomethane produced in the EU27 last year. So this is definitely good news, and it corresponds to 21% growth year on year. But now let's look a bit at the future, the close future, because 2030 is around the corner and 2040 is not far away either. So this section is follow the money and follow the plan. Because if we want to have a good and educated guess of where we can be in 2030 and 2040, we need to check the investments and we need to check regulations and where our policymakers are putting the objectives. So first of all, let's follow the money. Last year, we tried to identify all the investments that were earmarked in biomethane in Europe. We did that by interviewing our members, the large companies, the investment companies, the ones that were going into projects, and we paid attention not to overlap the different answers. And this is the result. So 6.3 billion cubic meter a year of added biomethane capacity in Europe by 2030, and 950 new biomethane plants by 2030. And this is basically the calculation that stems from 27 billion a year mark in investments in biomethane. Most of them are going actually to greenfield and a little part to brownfield. Most of the investments are being earmarked from the year 2026 to 2030, whereas in the next 2 years there is still an interesting portion that will be injected. The top country, unsurprisingly, are Denmark. They have a very good target to green the grid, and this is really pushing the market. Poland, a newcomer, Italy, United Kingdom, and France. In the slide here, you also see Ireland, so we did record some investments from there as well, and Ireland is still in the top 10, so I would say that this is quite positive. Here we're talking only about private investments, not public ones. As I was saying before, most of the investments are going for greenfield and a little bit less for brownfield. There is also a portion that is in merger and in acquisitions. And now let's look at the plans. And so this is, again, a bit of a dull slide, but it tells a lot. So as we all know, in 2022, the European Commission has identified a need to substitute fossil gas and has identified the need to scale up hydrogen and biomethane, including an indicative target of 35 billion cubic meters a year for biomethane. That is quite an ambitious one, but as we like to say, is something that could be achieved considering the potential. Now, from then onwards, the Commission instructed the member state to include a target or a strategy for biogas and biomethane in their NECPs. And this suggestion worked wonders, because from a situation in which we had only a handful of countries which had a biomethane or a biogas strategy, we passed to having around 18, 19 countries heavily mentioning or dedicating a full strategy and a target to the sector. However, we're short, so 35 BCM was the indicative target, and as you see from the slide here, we're falling around 15 BCM by 2030 if we were to consider the data. Let's look once again at the plan, but mostly about the potential. So at the beginning of this year, we worked together with Guidehouse to understand what is the sustainable potential for biomethane. And I underline sustainable because here we're taking into consideration competition of uses, for example, food and feed dialogue, and others. And the answer is in this slide. So by 2030, we could sustainably produce in Europe 44 billion cubic meters of biomethane, and this portion could go up to 111 billion cubic meters by 2040 and 165 by 2050. We're considering here two main technological pathways. One is anaerobic digestion and the other one is gasification. But we're starting also considering what role methanation can play within our sector. Here you see the spread and the breakout per country, and you see again the position of Ireland compared to its dimension. This is the potential that was put down by Guidehouse, also taking into consideration inputs from national associations and other stakeholders. Going back to the plan and to the regulation, I just wanted to show you what our potential corresponds to when we look at the 2040 strategy. So the Commission in February this year published a political document that has no relevance in terms of binding targets or regulating the sector, but gives an inspiration of where we need to be by 2040 if we are to save 90% of greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. So the role for gaseous fuels in the Commission view is really marginal. And they see a drop in demand for gaseous fuels for the future. But we did this exercise anyway to basically compare what could be the potential of biomethane compared to the demand that the Commission takes into account. And you see there the result. So a gas consumption trajectory that goes down, biomethane that goes up, and this would basically mean that the role of biomethane could be not marginal anymore, but in a scenario like that could basically cover most of the demand. Now, interesting from this strategy is also the role of biomethane for the future. And the focus, as you see in the slide, is mostly in transport fuel for the maritime sector. The role of bioenergy is quite predominant also in the strategy. Here we're talking about approximately 465 to 580 terawatt hour. And this includes solid biomass, biogases, biofuels, and organic solid waste. The Commission does not go into detail of how much of which subsector needs to be utilized. And finally, quite important, and that we see it in all scenario and in all modeling, anaerobic digestion is a prime technology being considered to mitigate emissions from animal farming, but also to provide a digestate and to avoid nutrient loss and a substitution to synthetic ones. Now, what can we expect from the new institutional cycle? And this is a 100 million euro, I would say, question. So I will try to give some ideas. In July last year, July this year, Ursula von der Leyen was basically going through her program and presenting what she would bring of new for the next 5 years. And you see on screen the keywords that are used and are coming on and on again in Europe's Choice, which is her political program. The first one being prosperity, simplification for companies, defense, society, quality of life as better food and better environment, and leadership, leadership in trade, leadership in defense, and leadership in policy. Our program, which was quite a vague one, has been largely inspired by also the work of the former Prime Minister Draghi and the Draghi report that was formally presented to the European Parliament in September. This report is a 400 pages one, and it has been quoted everywhere. I'm not sure that everybody has read it in the details though, but there are at least 3 main takeaways that we can look at. So Draghi's report is a humbling one. It's looking at Europe states at the moment of competitiveness, and there are 3 action areas that he identifies. The first one is that Europe must refocus its collective efforts in closing innovation gaps with the US and with China, and this is pivotal. The second one is that we need to have a joint plan for decarbonization and competitiveness. So keeping the industry alive and at the same time decarbonize, and it's not easy considering current energy prices. And the third one is increasing security and reducing dependencies. And here when we're talking about the dependencies, we're talking about everything. We're talking about food, we're talking about fertilizers, and obviously about gas and energy. What is standing in the way? So to boil it down a bit. The first, Europe is lacking focus. So there are a lot of common objectives, but there is also a lot of internal competition of these objectives. The priorities are seldom clear, and the policy actions are not holistic or not very well integrated. The second problem is that Europe is wasting common resources. So we have a large collective spending power among the different countries, but the spending power is diluted among the different instruments. And finally, Europe does not coordinate where it matters. So in certain cases, objective of directives or regulations are not very well harmonized with others. And for us, this is very important because our sector cuts across agriculture, environment, climate, energy. So we need to have coordination. So a little word on the new European Commission team. This is not a finalized one. These people still need to go through the Parliament and still need to be approved there. But what I would say when looking at the new team is the old motto from Clinton's campaign, it's the economy is stupid. So when we look at the missions letter, competitiveness is everywhere. A new industrial deal is everywhere. So this is also a large hope that for industrial sector and for renewables, we can have probably more support under this mandate than we had in the past. And now the last slide. There are 3 main policies that we need to watch for in 2024 and 2029 for different reasons. So for our sector, the first one is going to be the new Common Agricultural Policy. The first reason for this is that the Common Agricultural Policy corresponds to 1/3 of the EU budget. So this is the way, and this is the largest financing instruments that we have ahead. So for this, the impact could be on feedstock, so on sourcing for biogases, on covering machinery and capital cost, and on-farm investments. The second pillar is the Energy and Climate Target 2040. We will have the first public consultations and strategies coming up in Q1 2025, and we can expect a revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, the EU ETS, and all the climate and energy probably by the end of 2025, beginning of 2026. And finally, not unimportantly, industrial carbon management. We talked about the role of carbon and renewable carbon into the future to hit the net zero targets. And we need a legislation. At the moment, we have the carbon, the CRCF, as Jean-Marc was underlining, but there's no real incentivization of biogenic CO2 compared to fossil one. So we need something driving this kind of market to have a better byproduct and a better market for this byproduct of biogas and solid biomass into the future. And with this, I conclude. Thank you.
Giulia, thank you very much, and Jean-Marc, again, you can see from an IrBEA point of view, and for the industry, the work that they do in Brussels, a lot of the laws and regulations that come down from Brussels have a huge impact on how bioenergy is recognised and on how we can utilise it in the energy sector. So the work that they do, and we were part of a number of the different discussion groups that they have and the working groups that they have, it's something that is particularly important to our sector.